For many reasons, 2012 really was the year of Kickstarter. It all began with a bang in March of that year, with Double Fine and Tim Schafer raising an unprecedented $3 million in crowdfunding. In the same year, Project Eternity, which eventually went on to become Pillars of Eternity, raised $4 million, Oculus was founded and raised $2.5 million, and the largest crowdfunded project in history, Star Citizen, hit just over $2 million on the Kickstarter platform. There were of course many more high-profile projects, and it seemed crowdfunding was creating a new age for games and development. Enter Elite Dangerous from Frontier Developments, a highly anticipated sequel to the 1984 classic simply known as Elite. Elite 4, as many were calling it at the time, went on to be one of the highest funding Kickstarter projects of the year, raising $2.5 million. But for those of you who were there at the time, they will remember that this Kickstarter project was far from a sure thing. The announcement arrived with a page of text and a lone logo. Now this was in stark contrast to many other successful Kickstarter projects of the time, which went all out with a whole variety of concept work, videos, promotional material, and many other things besides. But nonetheless, interest was high from the die-hard Elite fanbase, and £300,000 of the £1.25 million goal was raised within just a few days. However, due to a lack of updates and information coming out of Frontier, the funding began to stall. Whereas many other projects provided daily updates, Frontier offered absolutely nothing for nearly the entirety of the first week. In fact, after nearly 10 days, the company had only issued a single update to the project. This update made a very simple statement. Many have pointed out that Elite Dangerous on Kickstarter lacked video and concept art, and that's pretty much it, and they promptly added 5 basic concept images to their campaign page. Ultimately then, it was fortunate that Frontier wisely chose a 2-month crowdfunding campaign rather than the more popular at the time 1-month campaign. The first video for the project arrived 10 days after the campaign began, and it discussed the nature of procedural generation, something that was to underpin the very foundations of the game. By this point, Frontier hit near the £500,000 mark, but they still needed more than double this before the campaign could be successful. By the time Elite Dangerous had been on Kickstarter for 33 days, it had reached £683,000, just over half of its target. It seemed that steam was starting to run out, and people were well aware that the bulk of funding came at the beginning of a project with a small burst in the last few days. It perhaps didn't help that after 33 days, Frontier had only issued 9 updates. However, it was at this point that things began to really change, and Frontier started posting very close to daily updates. Now, despite the somewhat slow pledging at that particular point, it has to be said that this was an extremely exciting time for Elite fans. After nearly 2 decades of waiting, a sequel was finally on the horizon, one which used new technology and would be multiplayer no less. A living, breathing galaxy then is something many fans of the series had long dreamed of. By Christmas Day, the project had hit £950,000 and still had the $300,000 more required to reach in just under 2 weeks. Fortunately, Frontier started pumping out concept art and discussion updates on ship customization, among many other things. By the 3rd of January, with just 2 days to spare, they hit their target. Within the last few days of the Kickstarter campaign, there was a massive upsurge in pledges, and the project ultimately ended up with £1.578 million, more than £300,000 above its goal, making it at the time the highest Kickstarter goal to be funded. Of course, this wasn't the end, but actually the beginning. Development of Elite Dangerous would now get under full swing, and Frontier began posting some of the best updates and information that they have ever released. At this time, development was fairly transparent, with regular video progress diaries discussing the game and its design, and later come newsletters highlighting what was being worked on, along with discussion on the game's roadmap. It was a truly exciting time to be a fan of Elite Dangerous, and the road of possibilities was absolutely open. I'd perhaps be remiss though not to mention the design discussion forums as well, which people gained access to with a £300 pledge, and over 700 people pledged at this level or more. Now this exclusive forum was to be where backers would discuss ideas on development of the game with Frontier. The archives of this forum are still available to this day. This period of extensive design information lasted until well into 2014, and forum user Forger, better known by his YouTube channel name as Cornelius, put together an exceptional document collating all the official information on the design and direction of the game. Now, whilst most of this information is now a minimum of 4 years old, it is nonetheless a fascinating read into the ideas and concepts of what Elite Dangerous was intended to be, and you can find a link below to this full document. The first alpha for Elite arrived in December of 2013, just under a year since the successful completion of the Kickstarter funding. The alpha was made available to all alpha level backers who made a pledge of £200 or more. The alpha phase began with single player combat, giving backers access to the game for the first time. But not only that, this was the first time that the public got to see Elite Dangerous in action. The alpha phase continued throughout the early part of the year, culminating with Alpha 4, and this enabled players to experience supercruise, hyperspace jumps, and 4 different star systems. The first stage of beta, then known as Premium Beta 1, began on 30th of May, essentially opening up the Alpha 4 phase to more people. Meanwhile, the newsletters continued to release information on the progress of the game's development. The second phase of Premium Beta began on the 24th of June and continued the iterative nature of the game's development. Regular Beta opened up before much longer, eventually leading up to the so-called Gamma phase, with the game's final release finally happening on the 16th of December 2014, slightly less than 2 years after the completion of the Kickstarter campaign. Although Elite Dangerous missed its initial release date of March 2014, it nonetheless went on to be a pretty successful release. The flight mechanics and galaxy were widely applauded, and the relatively shallow nature of some of the gameplay was tolerated due to the fact that the game was iterative in its design, and much of this will be coming further down the line. Standing here in 2018, I think it's fair to say that Elite Dangerous has had a very interesting journey. It certainly achieved many of its original goals and helped bring back the space genre to the forefront of the gaming community. However, it's equally fair to point out that many people feel that it has shot fairly wide of its original goals, and one only has to take a look at the early design documents to see confirmation of this. Nonetheless, nearly 3.5 years after its initial release, the game is still developing new content, and perhaps the most eagerly awaited updates are still ahead. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.